If ancient scholars search through the fog of history, they will find such an existence. The Pope of the Dark Night, the angel of the Creator, the hidden emperor of the empire, he is still a perfect mentor, the guidance of Wan Men, the original source of pain. No one knows where he came from, only that he was born knowing it and living with time. Let's recite his revered name together. The true spirit, the pure person, the ruler of dreams, transcending the infinite supreme realm. Keywords of the novel. Mysterious. Starting from the Pope of the Dark Night with no pop-ups, mysterious. Starting from the Pope of the Dark Night. Download the complete text. Mysterious. Starting from the Pope of the Dark Night. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. The Pure. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The Pure. Truman seems to be having a long dream. That fairy tale-like beautiful dreamlike scene lingered in him, unwilling to wake up. Just at a certain moment, a sense of tranquility came, like the brilliant stars in the velvet-like night sky that day, eternal and peaceful. Truman woke up, his gaze fixed, and he looked at the source of the peaceful power. It was a small mountain 100 meters high, with a temple building on top of it. The entire mountain was called the Deep Darkness Acropolis by the people of this city-state. Countless night herbs and deep sleep flowers were planted around the gloomy acropolis, crowded with the towering statue at the highest point. Truman followed those believers on their journey, and now it is late at night, which is the time for the dark believers to pray. Truman took a deep breath in those night herbs and sleeping flowers. The fresh and elegant fragrance of the flowers lifted his spirits. The power of sleeplessness. This is why he came here to pray to the goddess. Misfortune is upon us. Many believers prayed to the presence who sheltered this city-state in this peaceful atmosphere, and Truman was no exception. He found an inconspicuous corner, kept away from others, and took out a book of dreams. This is a mysterious book that contains all the beautiful dreams and visions, colorful and magnificent beyond words. The Book of Dreams means that dreams come true. This is the name Truman gave to this Book of Dreams, very fitting. Its existence enabled Truman to achieve psychological and even fate invisibility. This is something that accompanies Truman, possessing dreamlike abilities. Just like at this moment, Truman prayed in the language of giants. More noble than the starry sky, the goddess of the night, who is even older than eternity, mother of secrets, the empress of misfortune and fear, the lord of sleep and silence. In this era, these three-part honorifics tend to point more towards the destructive wolf who actually wields the power of the night. Just under the phosphorescence of the Book of Dreams, everything was twisted and drawn into the statue in front of me. Truman stopped praying, and after a moment, an endless darkness descended upon him. He followed this force and closed his eyes. In the eyes of the dark believers, the statue of the goddess seems to have changed, becoming softer and more authentic. Truman disappeared, like a faded simple brush, gently wiped away by an eraser. When he reappeared, he was already in front of a majestic and rugged temple. A figure descended from the depths of darkness, like the stars or red moon from that starry sky. He was wearing a soft, dark robe adorned with countless radiances, as if cutting off a section of the starry sky. His face was hazy yet exceptionally beautiful, and his eyes shone like stars in the night sky. You have finally arrived here, Pure One. The goddess's voice carried a hint of laughter. Truman sighed lightly and said, "My condition is getting worse and worse now." He traveled to the entire ancient god battle, the era where mythological creatures were scattered for more than a month, and descended upon this dark city with the Book of Dreams. All of this was so pitted that at that time, I was particularly catching in this ancient city-state, and the dark believer almost sent me to the stake. And in this city-state controlled by the goddess of misfortune, his crossing was locked in. If it weren't for that dream book, I would have been eaten dry and wiped clean by you. Roast complained in his heart. He doesn't know how long the goddess has been descending, and even the landing angel is sequence one of him. Even believers in the entire dark city would be crazy, and the remaining amount of humanity is questionable. And for some purpose, the goddess even voluntarily revealed the fact of her journey, spending time with Truman as a fellow villager, and now she is about to obtain what she wants from Truman. And the title of this pure one, really? Truman shook his head, and the goddess smiled silently, waiting quietly, just like the darkness and tranquility themselves. Perhaps due to the Book of Dreams, or perhaps because he truly traveled from outside the universe, his body and soul were incredibly clean and pure. Even the magic potion he concocted based on the recipe in his memory couldn't leave any traces on him, and after drinking it, it would spontaneously condense out. This is too much of a pit. The only consolation is probably that his body and mind reject the magic potion while also eliminating the impurities of all the crazy and indifferent nature of the world. This is what the goddess needs. Have you found the reason for my drowsiness? Truman asked seriously. He spent over 2/3 of his time sleeping in this dark city for over a month. Moreover, this state of drowsiness has become even more terrifying, to the point where one cannot wake up, and can be called eternal sleep. It can only be confirmed that it is related to the dream book. The goddess's voice was gentle and peaceful. The Book of Dreams. Truman nodded lightly, as he had not yet fully explored and understood it. The Book of Dreams was deeply bound to him, and no one, including the goddess, could even get close and pick it up, let alone flip through it for research. I promised you, to sign a contract with you so that you can use the Book of Dreams to stabilize your mental state, said Truman after a moment of silence, looking at the goddess. Thank you. The goddess expressed her gratitude solemnly, pronounced in Chinese. As Truman had anticipated, the goddess's mental state was also not good. The landing angel did not directly cause him to lose himself, but that craziness and indifference had already penetrated deep into his bones. Thank you, I also need the power of your sleepless one. Truman came here to complete this transaction. He helped the goddess stabilize her mental state, while the goddess could alleviate his drowsiness symptoms and prevent him from falling into eternal sleep. The sleepless, this unremarkable power in the hands of the goddess, has become the life-saving straw for Truman today. Truman took out the Book of Dreams and gently opened a page. This may be related to dragons, the goddess suddenly said. Today, he is not the knight that has been laid out for thousands of years, and his mastery of specific mysterious knowledge may not be as thorough as Truman's. Is it the dragon of imagination? They naturally dared to mention this, with the dual insurance of secrecy and fantasy books. No, Truman shook his head slowly. The dream of the dream book coming true was very similar to the power of fantasy, but it was also different. Truman lightly tapped the pages of the book, and in an instant, an endless and dazzling light emerged, seemingly one bubble after another shining with dreamy colors. The spirituality of the goddess transformed into dots of light and fell onto the Book of Dreams. In this moment, Truman seemed to have penetrated through that layer of fog and saw something. His mind seemed to have flashed through the goddess's extremely indifferent face, unlike humans, with only extreme indifference and madness, as if he was about to tear Truman's body into pieces in the next moment. It can be imagined that no matter how plain and gentle the previous words were, they were all spoken in this crazy state. This was also Truman's first time facing the crazy nature of this world. Suddenly, a wave of madness surged in as if it was about to crush him. Blood and black filled his vision, jumping as if flesh was wriggling, with twisted tentacles whipping the air. Just the dreamy phosphorescence flickered, as if all the strange, bizarre, and even absurd beauty was spreading. Two forces intertwined, but eventually returned to tranquility. The essence of madness has not changed, but it has calmed down in a dream, no longer restless. And manifested in the goddess is her own madness and indifference fading away, shifting, and finally revealing a faint smile. He showed a form, as if a little starlight was scattered from the dark robe, with two thick wolf legs protruding from the ribs and waist, each with dark fur. Sacred and eerie, tranquility and roughness perfectly blended together. This is the goddess of misfortune. I'm not crazy, the goddess smiled, and the air seemed to be a bit cheerful, with twinkling stars dancing like the peaceful starry sky of that night. This time Truman was also able to perceive the existence of a human nature. "Your power is really amazing," the goddess said cautiously, and even if possible, the goddess would truly confine Truman and let this power belong to herself. Unfortunately, the dream book is too eerie, and can be considered the strongest under the ancient gods. He cannot even approach it. Furthermore, Truman, who held the Book of Dreams, was enough to make the goddess cautious. A badge appeared in the goddess's hand, with a deep black background and brilliant embellishments, just half a wheel away from the familiar appearance of Truman's crimson moon. "This is the sleepless divinity, connected to me, and can also borrow my power." The goddess handed it to Truman. Truman's eyes lit up and he picked up the badge. As soon as he picked it up, he felt a cold spiritual surge pouring into his body, like a cold drink in the dog days. Truman was invigorated and felt refreshing. The effect is very good. Truman was very satisfied, at least he wouldn't be sleepless. The transaction is completed. The goddess nodded lightly, feeling good too. Truman was also in a good mood. His fear of sleeping was indescribable, fearing that he would completely sink into the beauty of that dream after falling asleep. Now, this trouble has been resolved. "What was your previous name?" the goddess suddenly asked. If we consider the title of the Empress Goddess among them, this name points to him. Truman closed the Book of Dreams, thought for a moment, and finally bowed slightly to praise, saying, "This is the name I have written for you." More noble than the starry sky, the goddess of the night, who is even older than eternity, mother of secrets, the empress of misfortune and fear, the lord of sleep and silence. "I am your Pope, Saint Truman." Ha! Persecuting goddesses. This is truly an unimaginable path. Looking at the fellow villager, who claimed to be the Pope in front of her, and even reciting the revered name that could make her feel a little touched, the goddess couldn't help but feel uneasy. The two of them have met many times, and this transaction has established a certain degree of trust and friendship. Now, being ridiculed by this person who can be called a friend like this is really strange. Nowadays, the night goddess is the most stable and abundant time for human nature. But after all, the goddess was a goddess, her face remained unchanged, she just nodded lightly, causing Truman to hit a soft nail. Truman raised his eyebrows slightly, and now that he has gone from his eternal sleep shackles, he naturally wants to have some fun. He lightly tapped the Book of Dreams in his hand and eventually transformed it into a book of revelation of the night with a black background adorned with stars. God said, "Let there be light." God walks on the water. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Pope. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The Pope. Stop. The goddess finally spoke, unable to bear it anymore. "You copied too much." Cough cough. Truman coughed lightly and closed the Book of Revelation of the night. If you want to preach, who can match that? This is the most suitable path. I am not a deity yet, and this is not my path, the goddess pointed out, clearly refusing, which was too shameful. "Oh, anyway, people will copy me, why don't I come?" Truman muttered, his mood getting a little excited. "You will soon be a deity," Truman said. The goddess has a profound understanding of the eerie wonder of this collaborator. The destruction of the demon wolf is about to die. The sentence shattered the sky, and the goddess also turned pale. Truman once learned about the current situation in the world through a conversation with the goddess. The year in which the goddess came is unknown, and she was very cautious and did not disclose it. But the 8 ancient gods, including the giant king Ormur, the destructive wolf Fregara, and the alien king Vazadern, have not yet died and have been fighting. Crazy people will eventually be swept into the grave of history. Why don't we push them forward? This is the trend of history. Those ancient gods are indeed powerful, but they are too crazy and beyond redemption. Why do you know these things? The goddess just stared at Truman tightly, with scattered starlight, very restless. Truman has been here for less than 2 months, and he has not even left the city of deep darkness. Who knows what historical trends are? I heard the prayers of all beings, and your will. Truman immediately took over the position of Pope. Is the power of the dream book the source? The goddess ignored the latter half of the sentence, lost in thought. Truman's face turned black, and the identity of the goddess before her passage was not simple. Her sense of smell was extremely keen, and now even more so. Sure. The goddess didn't ask much, but nodded lightly, acknowledging the identity of Truman. The two had already established a certain foundation of trust, and many things were easy to handle next. This dark city is secretly protected by the goddess, and all of them are followers of the goddess. But outside this city, it is an extremely bloody and primitive world. For ordinary humans, this is a world of hellish difficulty, with extraordinary creatures that eat everything to the point of madness and extraordinary races that view humans as food. The city of deep darkness is definitely a special case, and besides that, those city-states protected by ancient gods cannot escape various tragedies. After all, it is a crazy era, and the ancient gods themselves are unreliable. From this perspective, this era should indeed come to an end. Now, my Pope, what do you want to do? The goddess's gaze fell on Truman, serious and cautious. Do what I should do. Not long after, Truman, holding the only book of revelation of the night in the world, ascended to the summit of the deep darkness Acropolis, holding high the scripture in his hand. Goddess above, will grant us peace and deep sleep. Praise the goddess. All believers who are protected by the goddess know they are lucky. In this dark city, there is no need to be constantly vigilant against those crazy monsters, and no need to be captured as food by extraordinary races. These are all gifts from the goddess. Buzz. The deep power ripples like ripples on the water, sweeping over all the believers in the dark city. Night vanilla and deep sleep flowers emit a glimmer of light, creating an unprecedented tranquility that soothes everyone's hearts. Praise the goddess. All believers find it difficult to restrain their praise of the goddess. At this moment, all the believers felt something and looked up at the person standing under the statue of the goddess. He was shining, his linen robe emitting a dim luster, and the divine emblem was pinned on his left chest, emitting a peaceful power. Goddess's oracle, I am the Pope of the city of deep darkness. You may call me your Excellency the Pope. On the statue of the goddess, there were shining stars that seemed to condense into a starry crown, which was worn on Truman's head. The people of this era are terrifyingly pure, and the miracle just now has shaken everyone's hearts. Praise the goddess, pay respects to the Pope. Similar praises grew louder and more orderly, and suddenly Truman felt like he had established a mysterious connection with these believers. At this moment, all believers understand the meaning of the so-called Pope, who is the representative of God and will replace the goddess in managing believers. He will be the father of believers in faith, belief and anchor. Truman pondered the mysterious connection between them, and through induction, pure light dots of different colors condensed, gradually forming a slowly flowing small Milky Way. Sure enough, it's not wrong. Truman looked at the dots of light in front of him with surprise. The gods need anchors to maintain their humanity, but what I need is to use these anchors of faith to pry my dream book. The power of the dream book that he could have used was negligible, but now with these anchors of faith, he is able to leverage even greater power. I must ensure that believers have enough trust, respect, and even reverence for me. Truman also took advantage of this. By becoming the Pope, one can directly connect with the followers of the deep darkness city and obtain the followers accumulated by these goddesses over the years. Picked the goddess's peach. Praise the goddess. Truman spoke sincerely. And at this moment, the dreamy book disguised as the revelation of the night trembled slightly, with dreamy phosphorescence falling from it and flying onto the believers, blending in. The city of deep darkness tonight can also be called the city of dreams. In dreams, these believers will receive what they desire the most and heal the deepest wounds in their hearts. But the biggest benefit is that the pollution they inevitably accumulate on a daily basis has been completely eliminated, and their mental state has reached its fullest state. "May our beautiful dreams come true," said Saint Truman, the Pure One. The next day, without sleeping all night, Truman, who was already awake, led thousands or even tens of thousands of believers to pray together. "Thank you, Goddess, for giving me food." The goal set by Truman for himself was to make this city-state and even one of the future Orthodox churches forever remember his name, starting from all aspects of life, and the most important of which is naturally eating. The goddess is indeed excellent for this dark city, with a bountiful stone equivalent to the 4 saints of later generations placed at the foot of the goddess statue, radiating throughout the entire city. There are countless foods such as fruits, and milk in this city. Such a city-state can already be called a heavenly kingdom in this era. Afterwards, Truman carried out various operations, truly making believers feel the omnipresence of God in their daily lives. He formulated a somewhat cumbersome prayer process and wrote it in the name of the Pope, the Book of Revelation, into the night. At the same time, he also brought over the things that originally appeared in the true revelation of the night and rewrote them according to the era. The Creator woke up from chaos, broke the darkness, and created the first ray of light. In the second age, the goddess wakes up from the darkness and will eventually retrieve the usurped power. Praise the goddess. Basically, the framework of revelation of the night has been established by Truman, and all future popes can only sew and patch it up. He even offered a book to the goddess as a sacrifice, but he didn't know if he would feel embarrassed after reading it on this day. Truman dutifully led all the believers to pray and had established a simple mass procedure, which was enough to allow his title as Holy Truman to pass down to future generations as the city of darkness developed and changed. The goddess is calling me. However, not long after, Saint Truman, who had laid the foundation for the future night church, disappeared, leaving only this sentence. Truman didn't deceive these innocent lambs, it's really the goddess who came looking for him. The goddess was ultimately moved, but it is more likely that she had already planned, but the appearance of Truman provided him with a better choice. After all, he is the subordinate deity of the destructive wolf, and his secret power is fully restrained by the destructive wolf, making many things inconvenient. "Please." The goddess's soft voice rang out under the statue. 2 things appeared in front of Truman through reverse secrecy, gradually becoming real. A glove and a dark robe. The ancient gloves can summon me in the fog of history, and also allow you to go anywhere in the world. The robe of the wise, the controller of knowledge, can also manifest as an information organism. This is what the Pope deserves. Hiss. Truman's eyes lit up as he held 2 things in his hand. The fusion of traveling mages and ancient scholars, as well as the knowledge of wise men. Hush. How did ancient scholars mix up with traveling mages? Well, in this era of eating everything, it seems understandable. And the robe of the wise is also a good thing. Truman has come to this world now, possessing the Book of Dreams. Self-preservation is sufficient, but when it comes to combat power, it is too unstable. With these 2 things in mind, as long as you don't provoke those gods and ancient gods, most of the world can go. He, who is known as the Pure One, is not afraid of pollution and naturally does not need to worry about any side effects. You must live up to your expectations. Truman solemnly said, and in the following time, Truman has been adapting to 2 magical items. The spirituality provided by the dream book is endless, and there is no need to worry about negative effects. He can even freely use the abilities in them. I can't drink magic potions anymore. Should I become the strongest collector? Imagining the scene of pulling out countless magical items to crush the enemy when encountering them, Truman raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "It seems pretty good too. But it's not a long-term solution either." Truman played with 2 things, lost in thought as he watched the dream book. A few days later, Truman, who was fully prepared, arrived under the statue of the goddess. Dots of brilliant starlight fell, and the goddess sent Truman out of this dark city. Truman appeared in a vast and endless primitive forest stretching to the end of the horizon. Now he has put on the robe of the wise, his dark robe adorned with sparkling stars. In one hand, he holds a dream book disguised as the revelation of the night, and in the other hand, he wears ancient gloves with hidden and eerie patterns. The black short hair is elegant enough, and the inner temperament of the pure person is even more brilliant. The face is fair, the eyes are shiny, and on the spiritual level, there is an angel's wing, and a true angel comes. In short, the appearance is excellent, making people feel good about it, and they can't help but want to get close. Not a newcomer, but a new book. Please support me. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Walking with the Holy One. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Walking with the Holy One. Truman looked around and saw a huge mountain range towering into the clouds, with its summit difficult to see. In the distance, there seemed to be several terrifying beasts rolling around, and from afar, the sound of wolf howls echoed. Surprisingly, this place is not far from the divine kingdom that destroys the demon wolf. Truman took a cold breath. Playing in the dark under the light is really slippery. Truman's hand, wearing the gloves of the ancients, grabbed at the air as if he had grabbed something, and he disappeared completely. When it reappeared, Truman had already left the demon wolf kingdom for a distance. Then he saw all kinds of strange things. Magic wolves, mist tree people, thousand-faced hunters, and even extraordinary creatures that can be directly used as magic potion materials in later generations can be seen. This is the divine realm surrounding the destruction of the demon wolf, where these creatures or extraordinary substances within their bodies unconsciously converge towards this mountain range. And the scene of these extraordinary creatures gathering together can be imagined. Beasts may have times when they are full, but these creatures will only become more and more eager to eat as they eat. Bloody, crazy, and bizarre, various scenes challenging the upper limit of human cognition appeared before Truman's eyes, and extraordinary creatures that had fallen into madness due to their diverse ingestion characteristics could be seen at any time. Of course, there will also be those who have persevered through madness, crossed levels of luck, and are selected by heaven. Truman observed for a long time and once again lamented the confusion before the sequence formula of the first blasphemous slate appeared. Nowadays, the name of the ancient sun god has not been passed down in this world, so blasphemy against stone tablets is naturally non-existent. He was about to leave, but as the corner of the robe of the wise was lifted, his fingers gently manipulated the spiritual thread of this area with the ancient gloves. The robe of the wise is constantly deciphering the knowledge of this world, and the key is naturally the ancient glove in Truman's hand. And Truman can unleash many abilities through the simulation of a traveling mage. Why doesn't this saint show up? Truman didn't mean to put the hidden person to death, but gently manipulated the spiritual thread, making it impossible for the saint to hide. Since it is called the Sage by Truman, it is naturally not weaker than the fourth sequence in later generations. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the air. That was a young man with a nervous expression, wearing a gray-white robe, thick hair, and a decent temperament, but he looked somewhat ordinary. "Are you a deity?" The young man showed some trepidation. However, both the induction of the dream book and the knowledge of the sage robe remind Truman that he has no reverence for the so-called gods. He was observing himself, towering like a giant dragon, and any of his movements seemed to escape his eyes. Even, it seems that something is disappearing. The hypnosis and virtual personality of the audience have caused them to forget some memories, and even made certain modifications to their personality. That is to say, whether it is the Book of Dreams or the Robe of the Sage, there is such a sense reminding him that if a demigod like a warrior comes along, he may not even be fooled by his own characteristics. Truman looked at the other person and then realized something. "Are you human?" "Yes, this is human." The young man's face changed perfectly, and Truman's face was also somewhat strange. "What's your name?" Truman asked. "Hermes." The young man is already searching for a way out, and intangible power is spreading on the spiritual level. Truman showed a smile, which can also be considered a dream come true. This is one of his goals when he goes out. Who would have thought of meeting him as soon as he goes out? Truman stopped holding on to the spiritual thread, and the atmosphere between the two quickly eased. I am not a deity, I am also a human, Truman explained to the saint. Truman still had a certain fondness for the founder of human mysticism. After thinking for a moment, he removed the secret power of the divine emblem and made Hermes across the street slightly widen his eyes. Is it really human? Hermes confirmed this fact. The mind and body have no mysterious or polluted traces, and are purer than newborn human babies. But Hermes had doubts in his heart, but at least he relaxed on the surface. In this era, Hermes was still young and had the ideal of paving an extraordinary path for humanity, which showed his sense of belonging to humanity. The human identity of Truman was enough to make him let go of some of his vigilance. And to be honest, most humans in this era are too simple and honest to be true. Are you observing the elevation of these extraordinary creatures? Truman looked at a thousand-faced hunter in front of Hermes, who was one of the celestial selectors. After a melee, he devoured the crystal of a six-winged stone statue ghost, and his luck exploded, directly gaining stronger power. Are you observing them and looking for patterns within them? This Sequence 6 to Sequence 5, with a small span, plus a bit of luck, it's quite reasonable, it's just crazy, Truman commented. Just a simple comment, but it shook the eyes of Hermes across from him, and the concept of sequence made Hermes seem to have opened the door to a new world. He is unfamiliar with this term, but with a solid foundation of mysticism in this era and even in later generations, he can vaguely guess its underlying meaning. That is order, and also the hope of humanity. Who? The sage of the dragon path, also known as the later audience path, could no longer hide their thoughts, and that thirst for knowledge even made Truman's robe of sages feel a sense. Can you teach me about this sequence? Hermes asked, bowing his head. Truman chuckled lightly and said, of course I can, but I have a small request. Take me to various human city-states to find some people. No problem. Hermes hesitated for a moment before finally agreeing. The other party is a pure human, not even worse than those extraordinary races that use humans as slaves or even as food, right? Hermes probably doesn't know the word human rape now. Very good, but I would like to ask boldly, how did you become a saint? This is somewhat related to sequence knowledge. The atmosphere between the two eased, and Truman also asked curiously. It's related to the sequence. Hermes had a realization that Truman's transcendent insight was extremely brilliant in the eyes of an explorer like him, which made his heart even more restless. I forcefully swallowed a crystal containing mysterious power when I was destroyed by a monster in the city-state. Hermes roughly explained the situation at that time. Hermes today is equivalent to the sequence for manipulators of later generations. Truman thought to himself, and when the city is destroyed, there is nothing lacking in emotional resonance of despair or determination, which can be considered as accidentally completing the ceremony. You are lucky, of course you are also amazing. The key to the operator's ritual is resonance, and without a determined determination to coexist with the city-state, the ritual cannot be completed. So what are your thoughts on your promotion? The two of them walked together, away from this chaotic battlefield, exploring sequence knowledge. The spiritual realm faithfully records all information, and later generations will also have ancient scholars glimpse one of the most important moments in human history through the fog of history. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Human City-States. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Human City-States. Taking you as an example, Sequence 4 can already be called a demigod. Truman introduced sequence knowledge to Hermes, and also used some extraordinary creatures in battles as examples. It's so. Hermes's expression was full of admiration as he saw a new world. I was able to become a demigod because I accidentally fulfilled the ritual requirements at that time, and I was lucky enough to be good at handling madness myself. Hermes had excellent luck, but his innate spirituality was also excellent. After becoming a manipulator, he often went to observe various extraordinary creature battles, and even actively manipulated them to observe the hidden patterns. This invisibly conforms to the role-playing method and stabilizes one's mental state. The emergence of Truman is more like a guide, allowing him to integrate all mystical knowledge into a sequence system, forming a whole. Thank you to the angel for giving me knowledge. Hermes bowed to Truman and honored him with an angel. Call me sir, Truman helped Hermes up. Yes. Hermes showed great respect to Truman. Perhaps in his view, Truman was already a human prophet, guided by the Creator to come here and impart this blasphemous knowledge to himself. Go to the largest human city you know first. Truman did not forget his plan. Then go to the Kingdom of Silver. Hermes thought for a moment and said a name that left a lasting impression on Truman. That's already the best place I know for human life. Hermes continued, there is a belief in the goddess of harvest, whose power can greatly increase the domestic food production of the Silver Country. That is one of the few places I have seen where there is no need to worry about food. Silver City. Truman's face was a bit strange, and this sense of historical involvement was really subtle. The City of Silver is the largest city-state in the Kingdom of Silver. Hermes also had magical items that could be teleported, and at this time, he traveled with Truman to the City of Silver. The figures of the two began to fade away and eventually disappeared completely. When they reappeared, they were already in the midst of a huge city. This was built by certain giants and human slaves, and it is ancient and magnificent. There are stone pillars erected on the streets, each engraved with symbols of harvest such as wheat ears, springs, flowers and plants. And all the stone pillars also guide in one direction, which is a huge harvest altar. Many humans kiss the land and pray devoutly towards the harvest altar. In addition, houses made of mud bricks and gravel can be seen everywhere, which is somewhat similar to Athens in Truman's memory. This is the scene of today's human society, where the city of deep darkness is the foundation of the goddess, who has transformed it. Mr. Angel, are you going to meet the giant king? Hermes asked cautiously. No, I'm here to find pagans, Truman said as he looked at the ancient city of silver. Have you ever traveled here for a while? Have you heard of anyone who believes in the sun? The sun. Hermes' pupils contracted slightly and soon returned to normal. The sun refers to the one who woke up from the chaotic sea. In later mythological records, in the late Second Age, the one who woke up was the true god and began to reclaim the power of the Creator. But a leap to become a true god. Even dual paths to true gods. The crazy nature can crush anyone's will, and even the uniqueness of the thief's path cannot reverse the fact that God awakens. Even if we take a step back, assuming that the person truly became a god from birth, then he will inevitably need a large number of believers to maintain his humanity after realizing his own situation. This is one of the largest human city-states, and it is very likely that there will be a believer there. And there will be traces of existence. According to the chronicles of the later elves, it is now the time when the fire first shone, not far from the twin years of the late Second Age. Of course, what made Truman more convinced was actually the attitude of the goddess. When Truman proposed the idea of combining vertical and horizontal forces and actively planning, he did not show any signs of surprise. Perhaps he had already had an idea and knew of that person's existence. Sure enough, you know, Truman said firmly as he saw Hermes' reaction. Hermes has always had reservations, and even now his performance is very limited. After all, he is the audience, and it is difficult to guarantee that he does not have a few virtual personalities hidden deep in his soul. Dreams come true, fantasies come. Truman didn't ask in a hurry, but instead looked at the book of dreams in his hand. Hermes, how did you get outside of the kingdom of destroying the demon wolf? Truman asked. I have been wandering outside the major ancient divine kingdoms to observe extraordinary creatures. Hermes subconsciously said. I was supposed to go to the miracle city to observe the dragon. Hermes' eyes widened slightly, and his breathing became faster. He looked at Truman again, this time not only with respect, but also with awe. The power to make him change his mind silently is unimaginable. Truman felt lost upon hearing these words. Fantasy books can interfere with real destiny like this. These claims are not even believed by writers. Truman held down the Book of Dreams, moved and read, and wrote down his next plan in the book. Is it equivalent to carrying 0.08 with you? Truman blinked. How do you know about the sun? Truman and Hermes walked on the streets of the Silver City, while the people around ignored them under the influence of psychological invisibility. I once walked in a dream. Hermes looked at Truman's calm demeanor, and the audience's ability to see through people's minds was of no use. He could only say, I caught a glimpse of the sun. Pagan. Truman asked softly as he watched the sacrificial ceremony of the goddess of harvest. Yes, they are too devout and even fanatical, praising the sun in their dreams, Hermes continued, and if it weren't for that, he would have found it hard. Truman's footsteps paused. Well, it can only be said that it fits the stereotype very well. Then I can meet them today. The two of them had already walked to the sacrificial altar of the goddess of harvest, and Truman had a faint sense of connection. The altar is high, and the edges depict various miracles descended by the goddess of harvest. That is the foundation of the existence of the Silver City, and they will also be disturbed by some crazy monsters, but if there are many dead people, the giant clan will even come to protect them. The most important thing is not to worry about food, which is much better than other human city-states. Hermes followed Truman forward, while also being wary of the giant clan. This is a kingdom that worships the Queen of Giants, and it is also close to the giant king's court, which may encounter the guardians of the giant clan. Ha! So fast. Just then, Hermes heard the angel Mr. beside him make a suspicious sound. He followed Mr. Angel's gaze and saw a tall and thin man with long silver hair. His face was delicate and his features were soft. He held a slate in his hand and was copying murals about the god of harvest. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Fate Angel and Sun God. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Fate Angel and Sun God. Truman's eyes fell on the handsome man, and for a moment he was even a bit stunned. He could only say that he looked even better than himself. What would happen if such a person drank the witch potion? Unfortunately, they didn't have a chance to see it. In Truman's mind, the robe of the wise had already deciphered a message, and he also recognized this angel. Angel of Fate. Ulysses, the only piece of information, even Truman already knew. In the vision given by Truman's own dream book, this angel of fate is shrouded in a thick shadow, and behind that shadow curtain lies an ocean of colors that is difficult to describe. He is favored by some highly esteemed existence. Danger. Truman felt a strong sense of crisis for the first time, and what was behind the shadow could have a terrifying impact on his existence. The threat level is not far from eternal sleep. Chaos C. Source matter cannot be touched. Truman had this understanding. The Book of Dreams seems to have sensed Truman's will and opened it autonomously, with dreamy phosphorescence scattered and about to collide with that thick shadow. Stop. At this moment, Truman's eyes were about to reflect the figure hidden behind that shadow. Under the influence of Truman's will, the dreamy phosphorescence transformed into colorful butterflies, like a dream shining into reality, creating an extremely brilliant brilliance. Fortunately, the other party also suppressed the somewhat restless force and did not pour out the seawater that still seemed to contain all the secrets. The two did not engage in a collision that could be considered as a source material, but that force was transmitted. Oh no! Truman couldn't even predict such a situation, and could even sense a gaze cast on him. That gaze carried a hint of ferocity and madness. After all, the giant race was not a good troublemaker, and the result of causing trouble here was predictable. It should be the goddess of harvest, Amabella, thought Truman in his heart. This is his kingdom, and the elemental breath created here is naturally perceived by him. He is casting his gaze here in response to the prayers of believers, and even he himself is not far from here. Before Truman had time to respond, he felt that every blade of grass had developed hostility towards him, and the entire land seemed to have changed. He began to be hostile towards him, rejecting him, as if he was going to become a tomb to bury him. Even he himself began to undergo mutations, and his hair began to wither, about to wither like a plant. Truman's figure flickered, and the whole became ethereal, breaking down into a jumble of knowledge, transforming into a torrent of information. What are you fooling about? Let's go. Truman glanced at Ulysses, who had not yet awakened from the power of the Chaos Sea, and teleported to his side with the frightened Hermes. The three of them wandered together, intending to jump into the spiritual realm. Just Truman and his angel were stopped by a crazily growing plant before even crossing the spiritual realm. Mysterious reappearance, the Emperor's new clothes. Suddenly, the corners of Truman's clothes fluttered, and a long robe, constructed purely of knowledge and invisible, draped over Truman and others. They seem to have disappeared, but they still exist, lightly passing through the plants. The three of them began to wander again and entered the spiritual realm. The two paths contained in the elder gloves are both privileged in the spiritual realm, and they are no longer afraid of Omibra. Of course, this battle was completely unexpected and not within the plan. Truman decided to quickly withdraw. Without hesitation, Truman was about to completely jump out of the battlefield when he was blocked by a decaying dusk. Now it's ready. The giant king, who sensed the aura of the source material, also cast his gaze here. As for the difference between the true God and Sequence 2, one can refer to the fact that later death rulers were almost killed by the Blood Emperor at a glance. If you have the ability, take a look at me. Truman was already able to roughly determine the position of the dream book, so he directly lifted it up to show the giant king a glance. It was best to let the dream phosphorescence fall on him. The Chaos Sea can cause pollution to the dream dragon, but my dream book doesn't work without reason. There must be light. A clear and magnetic sound rang in Truman's ear, prompting him to put down the Book of Dreams in his hand. If God intervenes, there's no need for him to trouble. The sun bloomed in the endless sky, its fiery rays tearing open the decaying dusk. Roar. A terrifying roar startled the entire spiritual realm. Just under the scorching sunlight, the decaying dusk appeared too crazy and disorderly to break through the blockade of sunlight. Let's go. Truman looked back and saw a terrifying giant phantom. He was holding a large sword, wearing tattered armor, and his true appearance was not visible. Behind him was dusk. This is the giant King Ormir. This is the ancient god. Truman never expected to see this person, all of which stemmed from the conflict between his unpredictable chaotic sea and the dream book. Is it true that the dream book has a certain source material? But I haven't heard of it. Truman was distressed, and the roaming had already been completed. Under the influence of human intervention in the fate of the awakened Ulysses, I arrived in a strange country, a strange church. In front of him was a man like the sun, wearing a white religious robe and a silver cross hanging from his chest. The first thing Truman saw was his eyes, which were pure gold, like a miniature sun. This is naturally the current sun god, which will be crowned with the word ancient in future generations. Of course, he may have already claimed to be the creator now. Who are you? Truman and the ancient sun god spoke at the same time, their eyes fixed on each other. But the next moment, both of them consciously closed their eyes and turned their heads. In a moment, Truman saw a dark sea that seemed to contain all the secrets of the world, while the ancient sun god saw a brilliant dreamy phosphorescence that contained all the beautiful wishes. Both things are worth exploring, but both of them also feel danger at the same time, turning their heads and blocking some mysterious level of intersection. Otherwise, the scene that seems to conflict with the source material will occur again. You can call me the sun god. The ancient sun god's gaze turned again, but it no longer had the meaning of exploration, it was just ordinary. My name is Truman. Truman's eyes also lost a few flickering phosphorescence. Truman. The ancient sun god was slightly stunned and pronounced the name in a way that did not belong to this era. Truman. Should there be light? Truman said the lines from the ancient sun god before. As expected, there was a slight change in the attitude of the ancient sun god. The atmosphere between the two also had a subtle and inexplicable transformation. It's probably good. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Salier. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Salier. Lord, let's retreat first. Ulysses left with Hermes, leaving only Truman and the ancient sun god in the church. This is a gathering of fellow villagers. Just like when Truman learned about the identity of the goddess at that time, he had a sense of identification, but at the same time, there was an invisible barrier due to the essence of this world. Do you want to drink? Truman suddenly asked. Vodka. Make sure it's authentic. Truman opened the Book of Dreams and took out 2 bottles of wine directly from it. Dreams have come to the world as my dreams come true. This is a gift for you to meet. Truman handed the wine over. Thank you. The ancient sun god looked at Truman for a while before taking these 2 bottles of wine, his face somewhat strange, with some regret and nostalgia. It's really a distant memory. He unscrewed the bottle cap and drank half a bottle, a very familiar taste. The rules of ancient Eastern countries seem to require a return gift. The ancient sun god lowered his wine bottle and his gaze fell on the divine emblem on Truman's chest. Got it. He reached out and gently pinched it, as if a sun had condensed in his hand, eventually becoming a sun emblem that was almost identical to the divine emblem. Truman's eyes lit up and he felt the effect. Eternal Day. The main function is to ward off evil and purify, but it also has the effect of awakening sleeping creatures. Thank you. Truman took it and placed it together with the emblem that contained the divine nature of sleepless nights. The dreamy phosphorus shone brightly, and the 2 badges merged into one. The divine emblem has 2 different patterns on both sides, with the power of the sun and stars surging, maintaining Truman's state. Sleepless and eternal day, I'm afraid I won't be able to sleep anymore. Of course, this is actually a good thing for Truman. Truman laughed, this was also an unexpected gain. Do you and that lady have anything to do with me? The ancient sun god has indeed met the goddess. Nature is cooperation. Truman's face also became serious, as the power of the chaos sea and the dreamy phosphorescence covered the church. How to cooperate? The ancient sun god asked calmly and gently, holding the cross with one hand. At this moment, he is more like a god than a human. The old god alliance, Lilith, and the destroyer wolf. Truman gave these keywords. The ancient sun god had a plain face and clear eyes, but was not moved by him. However, Truman knew that something called omniscient authority began to surge in the sea of chaos. Nowadays, although the ancient sun god has not taken back the audience and the White Tower path, he can indirectly grasp the power of omniscience through the chaos sea. He is deducing, using endless knowledge to deduce the context of this era. He does not have the authority of fate, but the writer's ability in this regard is not inferior. Lilith. The ancient sun god's gaze fell on Truman, lost in thought. Have you already talked to him? No one wants to lose themselves. Truman didn't answer directly, but rather indicated something. Okay. The ancient sun god nodded lightly and decided to follow the trend of this era. You can go find Suziel for specific matters. Afterwards, the ancient sun god walked under the huge cross, closed his eyes, and began to pray to himself. I always feel like this god is slacking off. Truman blinked his eyes and obediently walked out of the church, meeting Ulysses and Hermes. Hello, Ulysses, I'm sorry about what happened before. Truman looked at Ulysses. Previously, the chaos sea erupted but almost submerged Ulysses. Ulysses then moved his eyes away from the slate and looked at Truman, pausing for a moment before responding, "It's okay, you haven't hurt me, and you're a friend of the Lord." He saw the badge on Truman's chest, which had a familiar power to him. "The Lord's oracle has asked me to take you to see Salier." Ulysses suddenly thought of something and extended his hand to invite him. "Well, let's go." Truman and his follower Hermes walked under the leadership of Ulysses in the divine kingdom of the sun god. The people here. Hermes was somewhat shocked as they saw the grand sacrificial procession, the magnificent hymns incessantly praising the deity who brought sunshine to this land. Of course, such things happen from time to time in other human city-states, and what shook Hermes' heart the most was the mysterious power surging in some humans. The most crucial thing is that they have no abnormalities in their bodies, are spiritually stable, and exhibit a state of peace in their minds and bodies that Hermes has never seen before. "Sun, you have bestowed upon us sunshine and rain, food and holy water." The hymn is incessant, sung under the guidance of several priests, with a grand momentum, inspiring the true power of God. "What's going on?" Hermes asked absent-mindedly. "They are singers." Ulysses also praised the sun, hearing Hermes' confusion and turning his head back and forth to answer. "Singer." Hermes spoke with a strong sense of confusion, a thin film obstructing him, making it impossible for him to understand everything in front of him. Sequence 9, Singer. Truman reminded him in due course. Sequence 9. Hermes' eyes lit up, and everything was clear. "Do you know the sequence?" A voice approached from afar, and a figure also appeared in front of the three people. The newcomer was dressed in a deep black robe, with shoulder-length black hair. His face was somewhat similar to that of an ancient sun god, but he was even more handsome. His eyes were also black, with thick shadows faintly visible. His clothes were extremely exquisite, with silver threads and complex patterns, accompanied by gorgeous accessories. "Sushil, how did you come here?" Ulysses blinked and said in confusion, "The Lord's kingdom of gods has all been built." Sazriel's face turned black and he coughed lightly. "I'm here to receive guests," he said. "Oh," Ulysses nodded lightly, "then I'll leave first. My mural is not finished yet." Ulysses refocused his attention on the slate in his hand, gestured with one hand, completely immersed in his own world. "Cough, my friend, give me 2 bottles of vodka." The dark angel Suziel approached and whispered. Truman opened the Book of Dreams and took out a bottle of vodka from it. This Salier gave him a strange feeling. The ancient sun god was completely divine over human nature, and there were some emotional fluctuations when facing those distant memories, more like Adam in the Truman Seal. But as the king of angels, Suziel gave him a feeling of extremely strong human nature, stronger than Ulysses. Perhaps this is the meaning that he was created for. Obviously, Truman prefers to deal with such Hiss. "Good wine." Suziel suddenly poured a large bottle down, "Bay Harry." Truman simply grabbed a handful of dreamy phosphorescence from the Book of Dreams and stuffed it into Salier's wine bottle. The dreamy phosphorescence rippled, and the wine was actually refilled. "What a convenient ability!" Sazriel exclaimed, as the drink would not be completely consumed until the dreamy phosphorescence extinguished. "It can't be taken by him." Sazriel took another full sip and then put away the precious and heavy bottle of wine. "The sun god may have the ability to obtain something from this old era, but those wines will definitely not have a neutralizing effect on madness. Truman is showcasing his own value." End of this chapter. Chapter 7 is full of acquaintances. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This translator is experiencing an error, please try another translator. Chapter 8 Amanisis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Amanisis. It's a miracle that he can live so big, Truman roast. He was born like this. Suziel was very helpless, and his vice prince of the heavenly kingdom was also feeling tired. Hello, I'm Leodoro. On the contrary, Leodoro, who was angry from the opposite side, was the first to react and suppress his anger, introducing himself. Hello, guest from afar, I am Osikus. At this moment, a man wearing a white robe walked over, with a full smile and vitality, and a head of golden short hair shining brightly in the sunlight. He gives Truman a feeling very similar to the ancient sun god. You have already seen all the angels under the constellation of the sun. Salier also introduced Truman to these angels. Compared to the ancient gods, it's not weak anymore. Following the ancient gods is not weaker than nature, but the alliance of ancient gods is something that even the ancient sun gods need to be cautious about. Moreover, the ancient sun gods who wanted to regain power belonged to two major camps. If they did not split up, no one could withstand a fight of 6. Truman is here to push something forward. The two continued to visit the kingdom of the sun god, and the three angels watched from a distance. Why do you feel so weak? Medici couldn't understand, but I dare not take action against him. I even feel like something could happen if I provoke him. You too, who will challenge him? Medici urged the other two. I'm not a fool, Leodoro snorted coldly, indicating that he wouldn't be fooled. Oh, really? How could I not know? Medici blurted out a provocation, almost causing Leodoro to explode again. We may face a war soon, said Othello with a slightly restrained smile and a solemn tone. That's really great. Medici raised an eyebrow. With the support of the Legion, he is in his strongest form and most adaptable to war. Here. Truman looked in surprise at a city several times more magnificent than Silver City, which was at least thousands of years ahead of its time. The colonnades of ancient Greece, the domes of Byzantium, the Gothic spires, and the architectural styles that have been lost in time are reborn in this divine kingdom. When an extraordinary person becomes a construction worker, they truly have their own characteristics. Truman chuckled. There is no shortage of low-sequence materials and extraordinary beings here, and they only need to undergo simple selection to be granted magic potions. For today's and even future generations of humanity, this is the true kingdom of heaven. This will be the future, Truman finally commented. The ancient sun god was able to become the creator of the third age, as can be seen from here. Why is the ancestor of vampires called Lilith? After visiting such a huge city, Truman asked Salier. The roots of humanoid ancient gods are all humans, said Salier. Truman nodded lightly. However, Lilith's human nature is well maintained and she is the only one worth cooperating with. Salier was very satisfied with the collaboration partner chosen by Truman and the goddess. I have received news that the demon wolf clan has advanced towards the giant king's court. Did the goddess cause trouble so quickly? Truman was somewhat surprised. This is related to the commotion you made in Silver City. The appearance of the chaotic sea aura awakened the demon wolf, who had occupied the path of fools, from its slumber, and its location made the demon wolf even more vigilant. The demon wolf and the giant are immortal, constantly thinking of devouring each other, while the demon wolf becomes even crazier, with an uncontrollable desire to destroy once triggered. Affected by this, all the ancient gods' eyes were focused on the giant royal court. Then I have to laugh twice. Truman chuckled and shook his head. Around the time of the meeting between Truman and the ancient sun god, the chaos caused by the fluctuation of oceanic source material began. In the divine kingdom that destroyed the demon wolf, a figure was outlined in a rough yet peaceful temple. The goddess of misfortune, Amanisis, opened her eyes and walked out of her secret state. Her face was very indifferent, as if there was a suppressed madness jumping. She walked out of the rugged temple and looked around, revealing a vast and endless primitive forest, a towering mountain range that was difficult to see at its top. In the distance, there seemed to be several terrifying beasts rolling and howling incessantly, causing the earth to tremble. The goddess walked silently, heading towards the top of the mountain range, as if on a pilgrimage, very devout. Woo! The towering mountain range heard the howling of wolves, and the strong malice was undisguised. The goddess of misfortune, Amanisis, remained calm and faced the giant demon wolf intercepting her. This demon wolf is terrifying, like a small mountain stretching across, with dark short fur all over its body. Its 8 wolf legs are exceptionally thick and strong, and its dark eyes are full of malice as it gazes at Amanisis. I want to challenge you. The position of the god of misfortune belongs to the great Gosret. The demon wolf opened his mouth, and a strange light flickered above his body. It was the most profound darkness, with the power of secrecy and fear spreading, symbolizing silent destruction and disappearance. Amanisis looked behind the demon wolf, where there were several similar ones peering. If Amanisis showed any weakness, he might have been eaten by these wolves. A crazy ancient god may need a bad luck from the god, but he doesn't care who will become this from the god. And this is just the daily routine of the goddess of misfortune. These demon wolves cannot be killed, it's really annoying. Amanisis was obviously accustomed to the daily routine of being challenged when going out, but he just glanced at these walking characteristics lightly and took a step away. Roar! The 8-legged demon wolf let out a roar, and fear and hidden power poured out with the darkness. But Amanisis just walked away, transforming into a pencil drawing, wiped away by an eraser, and reappeared at the mountaintop. The power of secrecy and misfortune is very powerful, and those 8-legged demon wolves equivalent to sequence 2 or sequence 3 in later generations cannot even see her back. It's just a bit annoying, Amanisis. Another demon wolf walked over, but this one was somewhat different. It didn't have that terrifying power on its body, and was much more elegant than other demon wolves. From time to time, there were crystal-clear spiritual insects drilling in and out of its body. Antigonus. The goddess nodded lightly, and soon after, another demon wolf arrived here. This demon wolf was similar to Antigonus, with dark pupils occupying 3/4 of his eyes and a tuft of white hair on his forehead. The god of wishes, the dark wolf Kotal. Humph! Antigonus gave Kotal a disdainful glance and walked forward on his own. There is also a divine creature in front, half human and half beast, covered in black and white feathers, with a head that is closer to the shape of a bird. The forest white skin has eerie symbols, emitting a strong and deadly aura. The god of the undead, Salier. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Destruction of the Demon Wolf. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Destruction of the demon wolf. In addition to these few deities, there are also several children of the demon wolf who have arrived, all of whom are sequence 2 angels, and Gosret is also among them. It's just that no one dares to cause trouble at this time, and the destruction demon wolf has killed more than one offspring. All the gods and angels walked up to the mountaintop honestly, where was the temple of destroying the demon wolf. Amanisis crossed a mist and suddenly became clear in front of him. There is actually a magnificent architectural complex here that can be called magnificent in later generations, with countless giants, elves, and even other extraordinary creatures living inside. Palaces, cooking smoke, markets, this is the realm of gods. At the moment these people set foot here, the entire city-state fell silent. All living beings were dull and lifeless, their bodies spinning in unison, their empty eyes staring at Amanisis and others. Ormir. War. The oracle emanated from everyone's mouth, gradually converging into a sound wave that swept across the entire mountain range. All living beings in this region heard the terrifying oracle. Countless low-level extraordinary creatures exploding into blood mist, staining the entire mountain range with blood. Gradually, a will full of violence and destruction awakened in the depths of the temple. In the eyes of the 4 great gods, the darkness in the deepest part of the magnificent temple moved, and the crazy and bloodthirsty atmosphere greatly affected their mental state. The god of the undead is fine, without the most direct suppression. The dark demon wolf and Antigonus were constantly shedding spirit insects, crazily twisting and exploding, then turning into light dots and returning to their bodies, repeating their cycle. Amanisis also showed the same signs on her body, as if her body was about to transform into a pure eight-legged demon wolf, with dark and secretive powers running rampant. Her body was being secluded, and she controlled the soul of hurting to howl and shatter. At this moment, Amanisis showed signs of madness. Of course, all of this is a facade. Armani's mental state is very stable, but how could a flaw be exposed here? At this time, if you don't go crazy, how can you integrate into the group? Engelweed. Sunnisolim. These are two ancient gods, both of whom have fused plural passage materials. Although better than the destruction of the wolf, they are equally insane and cruel. In the deep darkness, two bloody and crazy gazes lit up, and behind the darkness, another force surged, peering at fate. Just the surge of this force of fate gradually intensified the madness of the destructive demon wolf, and the aura of destruction became even stronger. War and fighting were commonplace for the ancient gods of this era. Both the gods and angels were accustomed to it and showed no signs of surprise, waiting quietly. The aura of fate is still surging, and the spiritual realm has descended. The entire city-state has become bizarre, with secret objects constantly exploding and becoming part of the spiritual realm. The destructive wolf occupies the path of fools and holds a portion of the power of fate, which is naturally a glimpse into the outcome of this battle. All the angels lowered their heads, waiting for the command to destroy the demon wolf. Amanisis's eyes were calm and peaceful, without any unnecessary emotions. Roar. I don't know how long passed, but the destructive wolf in the mist let out a roar, and a strange power emanated. Amanisis's eyes froze and he stopped there in confusion, seemingly forgetting his purpose for coming here. His instinct is struggling, as if to make a defensive posture, but there is also a hint that makes him not resist. The rest of them were the same. Antigonus stared blankly at the secret doll of the father, feeling that it should be hung up, which would be more elegant. The god of the undead looked up at the sky, probably pondering the profound philosophical question of whether the undead bird truly counts as a bird. Gazeret looked at the back of the goddess of misfortune, began to doubt himself, and then realized that this enemy, who combines human and wolf aesthetics, seemed less hateful. Other creatures besides angels are even more unbearable, losing all their wisdom, forgetting themselves, and becoming fools. However, this power is not stable enough to last too long. In the next moment, the gods and angels will regain their spiritual intelligence, bowing their heads in awe and not daring to have any dissatisfaction. This is the fooling power held by the destructive demon wolf, which is not complete, but for these gods and angels, it is already an extremely terrifying force. Amanisis' pupils suddenly shrank, concealing all his emotions before regaining his calm demeanor. Heading towards the giant court. The destructive demon wolf's crazy eyes swept over all the gods and angels, but fortunately, the demon wolf was just crazy, not foolish, and did not harm these gods and angels. These angels will gather cannon fodder for this war and cannot die yet. Destruction above. All the angels from the gods dare not say anything else, respectfully retreat. The eyes of the demon wolf of destruction are still red, flickering in the mist. The ancient gods are just crazy, and at the very least, they still have reason, but they don't need it. Chaos C. The destructive demon wolf's eyes were wild and unabated, looking towards the unknown land above the spiritual realm. Source Castle. These are two sources that can be perceived today. The Chaos Sea is hidden deep in the center of the earth, and those who enter are contaminated, while the Source Fortress hangs high above the spiritual realm but cannot be found at all. We cannot give any chance to Engelweed and Sunnisolim. The destructive demon wolf had such a rational understanding, but in the next moment he fell into madness again. His body, hidden in the mist, was collapsing and restructuring, and the spiritual insects on his body were constantly lamenting, with imaginary tentacles tapping against the space. Yuan Bao. Yuan Bao. This desire that can only be seen but cannot be reached makes the destructive wolf even more insane. Previously, the dream dragon and elf king were also like him, but at this moment, the power of the chaos sea surged, and they had a chance. But he still can't reach it. The desire for destruction is unprecedentedly intense, and the entire kingdom of destruction is shrouded in a terrifying will. Amanisis ignored everything and evaded the interception of several demon wolves, returning to his own temple and secreting himself. At this moment, his emotions truly erupted. Destruction of the demon wolf. Amanisis' emotions were fluctuating, and his killing intent was constantly rising. It was only in such places that he dared to have such thoughts. The power of fooling is almost inexplicable to him today, and he may be stripped of his wisdom at any time, causing him to lose the calmness he relies on the most. Very soon. The goddess's emotions quickly calmed down, and upon reflection, she realized the difference between herself and before. My emotions have become even richer. The goddess chuckled lightly, which was not a bad thing. He did not come to this world for too long, and yesterday's scenery is still the clearest picture in his memory. After a period of time, the goddess of misfortune walked out of the temple again, wearing a battle dress and holding a giant sickle, under the cover of night, leading many extraordinary creatures through the dark path to embark on an expedition to the giant royal court. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Lilith. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Lilith Boom Boom. In a palace composed of coral and gemstones, thunder is beating wildly. It's the Chaos Sea. On the deepest throne of the palace, sat a man in a simple robe, with sharp and towering ears and a deep and handsome facial contour. But what is even more striking is the violent aura on his body, as if he would throw an electric spear towards the sea at any moment. He looked at the giant court from afar, with an undisguised desire in his tone, coveting the Chaos Sea for a long time. This time is very dangerous. There was only a beautiful and noble elf woman standing beside him, with a serious expression on her face, more rational than the elf king. Where is it easy to control the Chaos Sea? The elf king burst out with thick lightning, causing the entire palace to tremble violently. I couldn't do it before, and that dragon was also helpless. But the Chaos Sea is likely already under control. Haven't you seen that sun? Said the elf queen Gaoxanum coldly. The sun. I want to eat it. The irritability of the elf king seemed to blend into his bloodline, his voice like thunder, without hiding his longing for the sun. In the eyes of these ancient gods, adjacent or even non-adjacent pathways can be eaten, but adjacent pathways are more fragrant. Kill that sun, Chaos Sea, and he are all mine. The elf king's voice was filled with fanaticism, even with an impulse to immediately descend on the giant king's court. That dragon has the same idea as me. In the best case scenario, simply stew the dragon and sun in one pot, and then eat the Chaos Sea. Gaoxanum remained indifferent and did not have the slightest heart movement due to the scene described by the elf king. He was the queen of the elves and the strongest anchor of the elf king, able to make the tyrant of the sky fall to the ground. That wolf can't help it anymore. Let's enter the arena at the end. It also makes sense. Gaoxanum persuaded the elf king to suppress the tyranny and madness in his heart, waiting for the war situation in the giant court to become clear. The ancient gods are just crazy, not foolish. Truman, who lived in the ancient sun god kingdom, once again emphasized this principle. Sazriel has planted countless nails in various ancient gods over the years, able to obtain various first-hand intelligence. The major ancient gods are now mentally unstable and preparing for war. Levashid, the dragon of Utopia, is the only one that cannot penetrate, said Salier with some regret. Truman nodded lightly, realizing that the path where the Dragon of Dreams was located was a bit lackluster. It's impossible to play without it. Fortunately, he is your target. Truman focused his thoughts on his next actions. Do you want to come with me? Suziel raised his eyebrows lightly, feeling a little moved. "If you don't go, it will be difficult for me to persuade Lilith," Truman said as he looked at Suziel's emotions and intensified his efforts. "I have a lot of affairs to deal with. The Vice Prince of the Heavenly Kingdom is not talking about it, as all major matters in the Divine Kingdom require his decision-making. Throw it to those guys just now." Truman glanced at the angels in the distance. "They are all angels now, how can they have the leisure to fight every day?" "All right." Salier gritted his teeth and nodded, ultimately deciding to go out for a legitimate reason. "Medici, Leodoro, go and unite the army, prepare for war. Osicus, go call Eulurus and keep an eye on the changes in the battle situation. If you have anything, report it directly to the Lord. Suziel arranged his work in an orderly manner. "Yes." Medici and others looked serious. "Let's go." Finally, Truman and Saliel set off together to Lilith's divine kingdom. "Has Suziel left?" The ancient sun god sensed and looked towards the direction of Lilith's kingdom, his gaze also catching him off guard. Does fantasy still have such an effect? He spoke slowly, encountering something that he couldn't see through. The appearance of that thing allowed more release of the human nature represented by Salier. The madness that originated from the essence seemed to have quieted down a lot, and his state had also improved significantly. His state was even more difficult than Truman had imagined. The fool of later generations climbed up from sequence 9, and even in the least mysterious and influential Fifth Age, he almost became a spiritual suturing monster after becoming a god. The sun god, who is now a dual-path true god, will only be worse, and Sazriel is also his firewall. But has my dream come true? The ancient sun god's mouth twitched slightly. It's because Suziel is too tired, wants to rest, wants to be free. After spending some time with Truman, Salier's humanity became more abundant, closer to him who had not yet fallen into the sea of chaos. It's a good thing. The ancient sun god withdrew his gaze and prayed calmly. Speaking of which, you may not believe it. This is still my first time leaving the kingdom of gods. Sazriel and Truman descended into a region full of flowers, near Lilith's kingdom of gods, where all kinds of flowers and trees were exceptionally lush. That's why I pulled you out. Truman and Suziel smiled at each other and looked towards Lilith's divine kingdom in the distance. The red moon hangs high, countless flowers and trees compete for beauty, and a spiritual spring flows everywhere. Countless animals survive in it, and crops such as rice, wheat, melons, and fruits can be seen everywhere. Of course, there is also an authentic bloodline. Lilith, the ancient god of the moon path and some other pathways, even swallowed other sequence characteristics alive, said Salier, but his spirit is still good. You have to be prepared, Lilith is the true embodiment of beauty, Suziel smiled as he looked at Truman. Beautiful. Hiss. Truman saw the sudden figure of a young girl standing in front of the two of them. He seemed to have come from the incarnation of the red moon, with long blood-colored hair falling down and wearing an ancient and beautiful dreamy dress, enveloped and surrounded by the moonlight. All things shine because of his existence, the starlight gathers in his eyes, he stands barefoot on the flowers, proud and cold, speaking. Who are you? It is indeed beautiful, not only in appearance, but also in a mystical sense as a symbol, which is the concept of beauty itself. So it's this kind of beauty. Truman was indeed amazed. Hello, Your Excellency Lilith, I come on behalf of the will of the Lord. Salier seemed to have the sun shining on her body, causing Lilith, who seemed to be the incarnation of the moon, to squint her eyes slightly. The sun that appeared before. When the sun shone on the celestial realm, all the ancient gods saw it. We have a cooperation proposal here that you won't refuse. The dreamy phosphorescence fell on the divine emblem on Truman's chest, softly humming, and everything here was isolated from fate. The power of secrecy. Oh. Lilith's face remained unchanged, her gaze fixed on the two, and her body gradually became tense. Salier and Truman exchanged a glance. The ancient gods are indeed somewhat abnormal. Perhaps it is because of the arrogance and madness of the ancient gods, or perhaps it is to test whether the two have the ability to cooperate with the noble bloodline ancestors. In short, this ancestor of the blood clan has a shining moonlight shining on him, with strands gradually forming a Milky Way. End of this chapter.